Of course. It's one of my favourite topics. So I live in Sydney. Oberon's about 3 hours west of where I live. I'm on the beach side, so on the east coast of Australia, and Oberon is inland on the other side of the Blue Mountains. Um, I'm just thinking about Eyal. I came across this couple from Sydney in December last year, and I guess the biggest thing that I saw was that they were both working professionals, very skilled, but they had a family. They were working in their jobs more than the standard 38 hours a week. Have you ever come across professionals that don't quite just do the minimum? They take work home, they work on their computer overnight, and they were both doing that while raising a young family. The biggest thing that I noticed was that they were already saving a deposit. So they got to the stage when they met me in December where they felt that they already had some information. They were going to invest in property in Australia, and it was their first investment. So they wrote down their goals. We sat down together. They invited me to their house, obviously, for a coffee. But the area research that they showed me on what they were going to put their saved up money towards, it didn't agree with the agent's projections. So they spoke to me about their goals, and we implemented a prepare segment. What do I mean by that? Part of real estate isn't just hit and hope. It's not just thinking, Sydney or Melbourne or Brisbane is always going to go up in price, so let's just invest in something and see how it goes. You do need to work out what you as a person or as a couple actually want out of the investment. Are you looking for passive income? Are you looking for growth? Are you looking for a quick income, a flick? So when we sat down and we worked out what their goals were and what they wanted to implement and what they were willing to implement, their numbers were a complete breakthrough, because we analysed the deal that they had on the table that they were about to invest in, and the numbers didn't stack up anywhere near what they were thinking. But the first stage really... Sorry, Tony?
So, Amir, what you're saying is that this was an intelligent young couple that had done their research, but even with that, they still benefited from your knowledge and expertise in pointing out, okay, so your numbers don't match mine, and here's a better way to invest. Is that what you're saying, Amir?
I'm trying to be delicate by saying this, but the numbers they received
Yes.
were from the person selling. The numbers they received were from the person trying to sell the property. Now, as you can imagine, they've got an interest in making their commission from the sale. So their numbers, and I'm putting this very delicately,
Yes.
their numbers were skewed to show the benefit without any of the risks, without showing any of the comparables, and without explaining what could go wrong.
Definitely.
So that it wasn't that the numbers were all wrong, it's that the numbers were showing half the story. Now, the first stage that Eyal and Arit did was they changed the suburb they were looking at to research a suburb that had a higher income demographic. What does that mean? It means that the tenants or the people that would be buying the house in the future in the new suburb can afford to buy it. So the income in the suburb is important. That's called the demographic. The first property they purchased in Oberon in New South Wales was to renovate with a subdivision. So everybody knows the renovation side. They can picture themselves, especially from the TV shows that give you the
yes.
What do they call that reality TV show?
The Block.
It's all, or any of them. So any of these reality TV shows, think of it this way. They're really talent shows. If you're doing a construction or a renovation show, the show is a talent show to show what
How
you and your
good you
team
are.
can do.
Yeah.
So if you think of these talent shows, they're great, but they don't necessarily teach what to do. They just show the talent of the presenter in their team. And sometimes they show the drama behind the scenes of what happens when things go wrong. But it's not really there to teach. It's not an educational program. These shows are great for drama, they're good for talent shows. But if you think of renovating and you think of subdivision, it means the property you're purchasing as an investment might be divided into several properties. You might, subject to council approval, be allowed to separate one block into 2 blocks. You might be able to have the existing house stay where it is, but when you put a fence or a border and the council allows you to, you might be allowed to build a second building on the same block. So there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes. And unless you've got good advice from professionals, you don't realise if you're allowed to do it, whether the land is big enough, whether the area allows that type of subdivision or that type of work. So before you even think of construction, there's a lot of boxes to tick, a lot of checks to make. So what Ayala and Rick did were the first property they renovated, but they purchased a property that was large enough to allow for subdivision. And the projected return from their investment, their deposit, was due to double their investment.
I bet they were happy with that, Amir.
They were. What came later was a bit of a surprise, in that 3 weeks into their renovation, and remember that they're working in Sydney, so they're paying somebody else to drive out or a local in Oberon to do the renovation without them having to quit their jobs and to live in Oberon while this is happening. 3 weeks into the renovation, they received an offer that was higher than their conservative figures. So the new buyer actually offered to complete the subdivision, to complete all the work that needed to be done with council. And from 12 weeks between the purchase and the settlement, they profited over $10,000 a week. So remember, I'm just saying this from my own experience and from the experience of what I've seen with people who I've been helping in real estate. That may not work for you, but this is just one example that has worked. Obviously from this year, so that helps too. But look, so $10,000 a week for 12 weeks, over $120,000 profit. So $10,000 a week is, especially if you're still working, you don't need to quit your job.
Great.
They were very... They controlled it really via emails and phone calls. So now that you could do Zoom calls or video calls, emails are great, but when you can see the photos of the before and after and make sure that the trades are doing their job, it makes it 10 times easier. So they actually got to release their deposit. When they purchased their house, they put a deposit against it. And when the new buyer came in 3 weeks later and paid them more than what they paid, they got their deposit back. So the new contract released their deposit, plus they kept their profit, and they manufactured time.
Yes.
What that means is that just 3 months, with that extra $120,000, think of that in terms of how many hours you have to put in on your second shift or on your second job to cover $120,000 work for that same year. And they did that in 3 months.